Good morning. I'd like it if you take a Bible out to follow along with me, please. I appreciate everyone being here. Certainly good to see so many guests out with us today. Today I want to talk about the idea of making wise entertainment choices. Making wise entertainment choices. Does God care about the content that I consume, whether that's a TV show, a movie, something I'm just watching on YouTube, even the music we listen to. And it seems like the longer we go in time, the more technology advances, the more things, the more forms of content we can include in here, right? I think we can include websites we go to. Certainly social media would fall into this category of entertainment, just how we spend our time. And even things we might read, whether that's in the form of books or magazines or blogs or whatever. Does God care about that? Does He care about the things that I am consuming, that I'm taking in to my mind? And I'll start by suggesting, yes, God absolutely cares about what we watch, what we set our eyes on, what we read. And now, obviously, there's no, there were no televisions, there was no Facebook or Instagram when the Scriptures were written. But because God's Word is timeless, there's plenty of thoughts that we can take from His this divinely inspired Word we have to help guide us so that we can make wise choices in the entertainment that we consume. There are four basic parts to the lesson. I want to look first at kind of why this matters. We're going to look at two extremes that we can take and why it matters. Does it matter? And then I want to look at some passages that give us some basic guiding principles to approach this idea. Then we'll look at a couple questions. We're going to ask a couple questions to help us, again, make these wise choices and end with a few points of application. So first, I think there are two extremes in which we can take this issue. And the first would be to say that it doesn't make any difference what I watch, what I listen to, what I look at. Everything secular is okay. God doesn't care. I can turn the channel to anything. I can look at whatever corner of the internet I want to find, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's not only wrong, that's a very dangerous attitude, a very dangerous approach to take, right? Proverbs 4 and verse 23 tells us to watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. God's people have always been instructed to guard our heart. Keep a lid on it, if you will. Be in control of what's coming in, right? So that we can better control what also comes out. Jesus tells us in Matthew 15:19, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, slanders. And so at the very core of this lesson, this is about guarding our heart. And I was running through title options. That was one of them that I thought about. But that's what this is about. If you ever wonder, why did I have that thought? Where did that thought come from? A thought that maybe you're kind of ashamed of and you wouldn't want to verbalize to anyone. Where do those thoughts come from? It comes from somewhere. Right? It didn't come from nowhere. There's something entered your mind at some point that influenced that thought that you have. Every sinful deed starts out as a thought. James kind of raises the stakes a little bit in James 4 and verse 8 about why it's important we guard our heart. Why? No, everything secular is not okay. In James 4 and verse 8 he says, draw near to God and He will draw near to you. How do we do that? He says, cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. And so if you want to draw near to God, that requires a pure heart. That requires we work to purify our heart. David addresses this in Psalm 51. This is when he's addressing his sin of adultery, right, with Bathsheba. In Psalm 51, verses 10 and 11, he's praying to God. He says, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence. We know our sin separates us from God. Right? From Isaiah 59 and verse 2, our sin separates us from God. And so because our sin can separate us from God, we need to work very diligently to have a pure and clean heart. That applies to a lot more than just the entertainment choices we make, obviously. But the entertainment choices we make, what we watch on our TV, what we look at in our phones, what we read in a book or a magazine, is going to have a major influence on the purity, the condition of our heart. And so why does it matter what we consume? It's not just because, like the church wants to control you or something like that. It matters because the condition of your heart directly impacts your relationship with God. And so, I need to be careful about everything that I allow to have an influence on my heart. They say your brain is like a sponge. I know I've shared this before. I think this is my favorite analogy. But you wouldn't take a sponge, go into the restroom of your house, scrub the toilet clean, and then take that same sponge back in your kitchen and wash the dishes. No one would do that. That's pretty gross, right? But if we think about our brain like a sponge, sadly, a lot of people do that. A lot of Christians even do that. We consume things. We'll watch things on TV. We'll scroll through things on social media. That's just filthy garbage. And then we show up, to a place of worship on Sunday morning and try to give praise to God. It doesn't quite work that way. Right? We can't fill our minds with garbage and expect to offer pure and right worship to our Father. And so, if not everything secular is okay, what does that mean? The other extreme we could say is that nothing secular is okay. It's an all or nothing thing, right? And so what I mean by this is if you're going to watch anything, it better be a recorded sermon or Bible class. If you're going to read anything, it better be the Bible or a book or a study book, written by a faithful Christian. And these are the only things that we should listen to. If you're going to listen to any music, it better be a cappella hymns. Right? That's the other extreme that we might go to. Now listen, if you want to take this position, you have the right to do that. You have the right to only consume that type of content, but I'm not sure that's even possible in today's society, unless you seclude yourself like the Amish community or something like that. But beyond that, I'm not sure that it's even helpful to say that nothing secular is okay. I don't think anybody here is on either end of this spectrum, right? These are the two extremes. And so where do we go? Where do we find some more guidance for where we land in this spectrum? Right? What should our approach be? How do we draw that line? And most importantly, how do we draw a line based on what God says? How do we know what God would be okay with and not okay with? And so as we work that out, I want to go through a few passages that can just provide some of these guiding principles for us. And the first is simply set your mind on things above. We could dig in and spend almost the entire lesson on Colossians 3, 1 through 5, where we read from just a few moments ago. But the idea there from verse 2, set your mind on things above, not on the things that are on earth. Right? You are in control of your thoughts. You're in control of your thoughts. You have to set your mind to the right channel, if you will. You think of the days of Noah, just before the great flood. We read this in Genesis 6 and verse 5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and listen to this part, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. We know how that story played out. God destroyed the world with the flood. Why? Because the thoughts of their heart were wicked. Because they were not setting their mind on the things that God would have us to set our mind on. Philippians 4:8 is a great passage, right? Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there's any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. These are the things that we need to choose to fill our mind with, to meditate on, to think on. Now, we live in a digital world that runs on what is called an attention economy. Okay, an attention, have you heard of this? Does this sound familiar? to people out there, and attention economy. What that means is the apps that run on your phone or the websites that run on your computer, the more time you spend on that app or that website, the more money they make from the advertisers. You know why Facebook and Instagram are free, right? I don't know who said it first, but the saying is, if the product is free, then you are the product. They are selling you and your time to the advertisers. And so the more time they are designed to get you hooked. And that's not some secret. That's not, it's pretty out in the open that they are designed to get you hooked and addicted, because the more time you spend on their product, the more advertising space they can sell. Okay, that's why so many apps and even streaming services on your TV nowadays, and then these smart TVs, they're on autoplay. And so one show ends, and what happens? You got just a few seconds before that next show begins, the next episode begins. They don't even give you a chance, right? You have to make the conscious decision to say, no, I'm done. And if you don't do that, it's going to keep going for you. Now, these things that consume so much of our time, are they helping us set our mind on things above? Or are they setting our mind on things of a more earthly nature? And if we're being honest, most of them, the vast majority are setting our mind on things of this earth, right? You can look at the list in Philippians 4:8. The things that are on autoplay, the things I'm filling my mind, are they things that are lovely and of good repute and worthy of praise? Are they encouraging me to think about these things or not? Now, obviously, we live in the real world, and sometimes we're forced to confront negative things. We're forced to deal with things of this earth. We're forced to even deal with tragic and horrific circumstances at times. And again, I guess the extreme, we have firefighters and police officers and nurses here who have dealt with horrible circumstances. And so sometimes life deals us with those situations that we have to confront. But again, the guiding principle, especially when we get to choose, when you have, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour of downtime, and you get to choose what to fill your mind with, are you setting your mind on things above? Another principle, just look away. Just don't look at some things. Turn over to Psalm 101. Psalm 101, verse 3 begins, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. There are some things we just should not look at. I like the way the New Living Translation puts this. He said, I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. You stop and think about today's entertainment business, and it's like the more vile and the more vulgar a video it is, the more popular it is, isn't it? More vile equals more views in today's society, unfortunately. Look at the greater context, because I think this is important to see and kind of interesting to contrast and think about their last point. Look at the greater context of Psalm 101, just a few verses around it. Go back up to verse 1. David says, I will sing of loving kindness and justice to you, O Lord. I will sing praises. I will give heed to the blameless way. When will you come to me? I will walk within my house in the integrity of my heart. I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not fasten its grip on me. There's a lot we could say about Hollywood in verse 3, isn't there? I hate, right, the work of those who fall away. Verse 4, a perverse heart shall depart from me. I will know no evil. I will know no evil. So we see what the psalmist is doing. We see what David is doing, and kind of the opposite of what we should be doing at first. He says, I'm going to sing of loving kindness and justice. I'm going to sing praises to God. Right? He's filling his mind on things that are good and praiseworthy there. He's determined to guard his heart. Right? He's worried about the integrity of his heart, verse 2. He's determined not to have a perverse heart, verse 4. And so part of guarding his heart, right in the middle of that, verse 3, I'm not going to look at anything vile and vulgar. I'm going to keep those things away from my eyes and out of my mind. Now, obviously, again, there's plenty of worthless, vulgar things that we should not look at. But high on that list, and I think I'd be remiss not to mention this in a topic like entertainment, high on that list are things of a sexual nature, right? Immodestly dressed people, both women and men, right? Both men and women can dress very immodestly, and I'm afraid it's so common that we don't even blush when we see people dressed inappropriately nowadays. When a person is dressed inappropriately, we need to give them their privacy, right? We need to look away and give them their privacy before our thoughts turn to a place that we should not allow them to turn. In Matthew 5, verse 28, Jesus warns everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. I mean, that seems like that's the goal of a lot of Hollywood, isn't it? In Job 31, verse 1, Job says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I gaze at a virgin? We would do well to follow Job's example and make the decision not to look at anyone in a lustful manner. Another guiding principle, be careful of your influences. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33, says, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. We usually apply that verse to the people we spend our time with, and that certainly is probably the best, most direct application of it. But what is it about the people you spend time with that influences you? The things they say, the things they do, right? And so if the things people say and the things people do influence you, doesn't it make sense that the things people say on TV, the things people say on Instagram are going to influence you? Right? Our entertainment choices influence us. By the way, that's why we call famous people on social media, what? Influencers. That's like the technical name for it, is they are influencers, because they are influencing vast quantities of people through the content that they create. And again, we mentioned, I'm forgetting her name now, but the gal that talks to the toddlers. You all know what I'm talking about. These are influencing little kids through YouTube in ways that are ungodly and unrighteous even. Finally, very simply, just never approve of sin. Never approve of sin. Ephesians 5:11 says, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead expose them. Instead expose them. We've been through Romans 1:28 through 32 warns against even approving of people practicing sin. So just think about that. When you decide what content to consume in whatever media you consume it, be careful that your choice is not in any way encouraging or condoning or promoting sin. And even the sin of other people, right? It might not be you doing the sinful thing, but if you are encouraging or promoting the person on the other side of that screen to sin, we don't need to engage in that. And so let's ask a couple questions, just two simple questions to help us, again, figure out what kind of choices we need to be making as Christians. The first is this. Is it wrong then? Is it wrong to consume content that has anything at all to do with sin? In light of everything I've addressed already, it's tempting to say, if the storyline has anything to do with sin at all, then a Christian just should not watch it, should not consume it. However, I don't actually think that's true, because even Jesus told stories dealing with sin, right? But it's the way in which these stories are told that makes a very, very big difference. In Luke 16, for example, we won't read it, but Jesus tells a parable about a dishonest, underhanded manager, right? But what's the point of the story? The point of the story is not to condone his underhandedness. The point of the story is to teach a lesson. To teach a lesson on morals and how we should conduct ourselves. And when you stop and think about it, the Bible contains several stories that deal with real people engaging in sinful behavior. And so if it were wrong for a Christian to consume any content in which the storyline deals with sin, we couldn't read large portions of the Bible, right? Think of Genesis 19. Genesis 19 and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The depravity there, the depravity that even Lot succumbs to. Stories like that are in the Bible for a purpose, very specific purpose of teaching us, of giving us examples of what God approves of and what God condemns. And so that leads right into the next question I think we have to ask is, what is entertaining about this? What is the entertainment value of the content I am consuming? Because the point of Genesis 19 is not to enjoy the depravity and the debauchery and the intimidation that takes place within Genesis 19. The point of Genesis 19 is God condemns those things. God is condemning those things. Genesis 19 casts sin in the negative light that it deserves. Right? It is not glorifying the sin, as so much of our entertainment options do today. And so this question right here gives us a lot to think about in whatever content, again, that we are consuming. Think about an action movie. Is the point of the action movie to portray bravery and heroism and, a good guy standing up for the little guy? Or is the point of the action movie to glorify as much violence and mutilation as possible? Right? I still love comedy movies, appropriate ones, but I used to really love comedy movies growing up. And I had to start asking myself, what's funny about this? What's the joke? What am I supposed to be laughing at? Am I supposed to be laughing because somebody used foul language? Am I supposed to find it amusing that someone told a vulgar joke? Right? Am I supposed to find humor in jokes that make light of sinful behavior? Because Proverbs 14 verse 9 says, fools mock at sin. And when we're enjoying, some form of comedy where we are laughing because of sinful behavior, God says you're a fool. We're being foolish when we do that. If the point is to mock at sin, to laugh at sin, or because of sin, that should not be entertaining to a Christian. And I'll tell you, if you catch yourself start to laugh, maybe it strikes you as funny right away. If you think about it this way, is this sinful? You're going to stop laughing real fast. Really fast. Okay? And then what do? Well, go back to some of the principles we talked about. Look away. Turn it off. Right? Move past that. Am I supposed to be rooting for the bad guy? This really troubles me. I don't know how many things, just trailers, commercials, or things I've seen in recent years of movies that portray a bad guy as the protagonist. Right? It's a definite villain. They're portraying as the good guy, the guy that you're supposed to be rooting for in the film, in the show, or whatever. I think about Isaiah 5 and verse 20. It's very clear on this. Isaiah 5 and verse 20 says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substituted darkness for light and light for darkness. So ask yourself, does this movie call evil good? Am I rooting for the bad guy? Are there any good guys? There have been some shows, that are very well-known shows, and you start to watch them, and wait a minute, there's no good guy here. What am I rooting for in this? Right? Turn it off. I could go on and on. Right? A Christian should not be cheering for criminal behavior. Right? You should not be hoping that the main character winds up, in a relationship with this other person. If that's going to be an unscriptural marriage, why are you rooting for that? Don't root for that. You see that in a lot of, these rom-coms or even Hallmark-style movies of where you're rooting for a character to end up in an unscriptural marriage. That should not be entertaining to a Christian. Again, we could go on and on, but what is the entertainment value of the content you are consuming? If the point is to enjoy sinful behavior, then beloved, you need to turn it off. You need to put the book down. You need to find something else to set your mind on. Sin separates a person from God. And it robs God of the glory that He deserves from us. God's children should never be entertained by that. Again, probably other questions we could ask, but for time's sake we'll move on and make a few points of application. So what do I do? What should I do? First, be intentional. You have to be intentional. Proverbs 27 verse 12 says, "A prudent man sees evil and hides himself. The naive proceed and pay the penalty." Pay attention. Being prudent is just the idea of paying attention. Right? Be aware. Don't be so... You know the world we live in. You know the world is at odds with God and His Word. So don't be naive when you go to consume entertainment. This idea of mindless consumption should not... that should be foreign to God's people. We should not mindlessly consume anything. Pay attention to what you're watching, what you're scrolling, what you're reading. Okay, if you ignore the ratings that are put on movies and TV shows, which they tell you what to expect, that's being naive. And by the way, who puts out these ratings? Who deems a movie to be rated PG, PG-13, R, or whatever? Because I guarantee you, it's not elders from a local church, from a sound church. These are worldly men who say, yeah, this movie needs to be rated R because it has some bad stuff in it. If the world is telling you this movie is not appropriate for people under 17, what does that mean for us as Christians? Right? Consider where that's coming from in the first place. Don't act surprised when you start to watch a show, if it says like TVMA at the top corner, for mature, and then, they have foul language in it. I didn't see that coming. Really? You know what you're getting into. Don't be naive. Have a plan. You need to have some established guidelines for what is okay to watch and what is not. Figure that out before you start watching something, before you start scrolling something, before you start reading something, right? Know when to say no. And you know what you can do? Check parental controls. There are so many resources to check parental controls, websites and things that can tell you exactly what to expect in certain shows and movies, right? What kind of language there is, if there are any, romantic scenes, if there's any violence, drug or alcohol use. You can find these things out without actually watching the show. We live in the 21st century, so take advantage of those tools. And by the way, I'm not just talking about using parental controls if you're going to sit down and watch a show with kids. All right? Chelsea and I check this all the time. If we're going to watch something after the boys are in bed, we still check the parental controls to make sure that it's appropriate, to make sure that it's okay to watch or not. And it's sadly not uncommon to say, nope, can't watch that one. Check these things. Be intentional. Because what are we doing? We're guarding our heart. We're protecting our heart. Because if I'm going to draw near to God, I have to have a clean heart. So be intentional, then be convicted. And again, this means actually telling yourself no. Having the conviction, no matter how tempted you are to consume something, to say, nope, I can't do it. In Daniel 1 and verse 8, we read that Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or wine. I know that's not talking about what Daniel liked to watch on TV or what social media apps he liked to scroll through. All right, but the point is the same. You have to make up your mind not to defile yourself, not to defile your heart with your entertainment choices. Again, plenty of plenty of options out there that might look highly entertaining for one reason or another. But a person who is interested in having a pure heart before God, you just have no business consuming these things. So again, maybe you start a show, maybe you start a book. Right? Chelsea loves to read. She can read way faster than I can. I can't tell you how many times she's like, I had to stop another book today. It had things in it that were not good. So you got to put it down if that's what it is. Right? And it's very subtle. It's not always obvious based on the cover. You can't judge a book by its cover, right? Have the conviction to put it down. A few years ago, Disney came out with a movie called Lightyear, based on the Buzz Lightyear character, the To Infinity and Beyond guy from Toy Story. And Johnny and I are huge Buzz Lightyear fans. He's had the toy since he was like 3. He dressed up as Buzz to go trick-or-treating when he was like 5. And so they announced that this Lightyear movie was going to come out a year or more before it came to the theaters. And so we were so excited. Oh, buddy, we're going to go watch that, as soon as we can. We were so excited for this movie. And then, a few months before it came out, it was reported that they were including a homosexual character, a homosexual relationship in this movie geared for kids. So I said, buddy, we can't go watch that movie. Right? We were bummed. But my convictions would not allow us to go pay money to support something like that. That is so, openly supporting sin. Going out of their way to make sure to include this politically correct sin, basically. We have to be convicted to make hard choices. And finally, be consistent. When you draw the line, make sure it's a straight line. Make sure it's a line that doesn't carve out an exception for sins that you're more comfortable with. Right? And so, for example, I've heard of Christians who enjoy watching certain shows, certain sitcoms. From what I understand, sitcoms that seem to, glorify, if not at least tolerate, implied premarital sex. Sitcoms you find on primetime television. So I'm not talking about, graphic things, but things that this is part of the storyline, is these characters that are promiscuous. And Christians have no problem being entertained by that. However, the same Christians would get disgusted the moment a show includes a homosexual character. Time out, Christian. Sexual immorality, fornication of all kinds should disgust you. Right? It should all disgust us. We should not be entertained by any of it. We need to be consistent in guarding our heart from sin. Consistency also applies to, again, the medium, the platforms that we consume our entertainment on. If you would not watch a show or movie on the TV in your living room, then you better not consume that same content on your laptop or on your phone. Right? You need to be consistent about that as well. When you're scrolling through social media or watching videos on YouTube, just imagine that what you're scrolling through or what you're watching, imagine again that that's up on the television in your living room, your whole family over. Are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with everybody in your household viewing that content and knowing that you're viewing that content? Or would you turn it off? Or what about music? A lot of people like to say things like, I don't listen to the words, I just like the beat. I just like the beat. Beloved, that's not how music works, okay? You can't, your brain can't just isolate the beat from the words that easily. You're still consuming those words. It's still entering your heart. And so we say that to justify music that we know has vulgar language, that we know has topics that are inappropriate. And so again, ask yourself, if the things being sung about, maybe while you're singing along in the car, or you got your earbuds in while you're working out or something, if those same actions were being depicted by real life actors on TV, would you be entertained by watching that? So again, the principles we talked about earlier apply to every form of entertainment we could consume. Set your mind on things above. Look away from things you should not look at. Be careful of your influences and never approve of sin. And remember our main scripture for the year, 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 31. Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. As children of God, whose life goal it is to glorify Him, we've got to be consistent in our application of those principles. I don't know everyone's entertainment choices and habits here. I understand it's a challenge because it's pervasive, it's all around us, right? The entertainment industry is a booming industry. I don't know if it's billions or trillions or whatever. And so it's a constant bombardment from the culture we live in, a constant bombardment from Satan to give us perverse hearts, to defile our hearts. I hope this gives you some things to think about, to start making better, wiser choices. And I hope if that means you need to make some different choices, my hope is that your love for God, your desire to glorify God in your life, in all things, your desire to be found pleasing to Him and to have a pure heart before God, my hope is that it's that love for God that encourages you to make that right choice. Before we close today, if you are with us and your life is not right before God, if you have sin in your life you need to repent of, we encourage you to make that right. If you've not become a child of God, if you need to be immersed in water for the forgiveness of sins, the water is ready behind us. We can help you with that if that's what you need. If we can help you in any way, get right before God, please let us know as we stand and sing.